Happy times.
Yeah, positive.
Let's talk about shit we like. Oh, you seriously took a screenshot of your...
I was lazy.
That's not a screenshot, that's a photo. You took a photo of your computer screen?
I was lazy.
You realize this shit syncs over Wi-Fi?
It was on WordPad.
Why?
Because. Don't question my methods.
I gave you a laptop.
Moving on.
Use it! Alright, we're going for the best of 2020.
Alright.
Best-
You know
best-
the drill. Number 10.
Really? Fucking unceremonious bastard.
Well, what? Do you want me to give...
Runner-ups!
Oh, runner-ups, right. Okay. Runner-ups.
Alright, so...
The ones that didn't quite make the cut, but almost did.
Now, remember, I'm not saying that these movies are objectively better or worse than other ones, just the ones I liked.
Yeah.
So this may be controversial to some people for being a runner-up. This may be controversial to some people for even being on the best of list. But Mank. I really enjoyed Mank. Mank was a throwback to the slow, wonderful Citizen Kane era of filmmaking. Some people thought it was slow and they didn't think it belonged on us. They were just bored and they fucking hated it. Some person that I read on Letterboxd literally said that Mank was worse than like being shot at. So, you know...
Okay, that's a bit much.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. But personally, I really enjoyed this throwback to Hollywood era that, you know, was a certain style and pacing. And I just enjoyed the way that it replicated that on a really deep level. And it took really deep steps to replicate that. And it just felt good as a movie. It felt like that kind of movie.
Yeah, I didn't like it as much as you guys did. I still like it.
I am now you guys.
Well, I'm referring to you and Sarah.
I know.
But I remember really enjoying it well enough at the time. My runner-ups were Come to Daddy. That one was kind of heartbreaking to put on the runners-up list.
And for those who have not immediately watched this after the worst of 2020 video, I'm drunk.
I feel like
Been drinking.
I feel like I should emphasize that how I ranked my best list, as I usually do, is based on a few different factors. Don't cheat.
What the fuck am I? I'm gonna read it out loud to these fuckers.
I like to maintain the suspense.
And by these fuckers, I mean our lovely audience.
Viewers. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Support our Patreon.
Go on.
I defended
fucking Charlene.
What do you want from me? I'm trying to make a living on YouTube. I kind of have to be.
Something to make up for the 5 movies I watched over the past 3 days.
Anyway, so I ranked it mostly on like quality of the film itself, like objectively standing, how it personally sat with me, and how like the lasting power, like how long did it sit with me, and how much do I remember looking back on it.
Sure.
And so like keep in mind like that's how I rank some of these going forward, because some of these might be controversial.
How'd you rank Mank?
It's not even on here. So,
that tanked.
So yeah, my runner-ups to Come to Daddy. Really wanted to put on the list, but I just couldn't slip it in. It just one of those things like it was so bizarre and so lovably of its own identity that I wanted to put it on the list, but I just couldn't do it.
I feel you.
And then Birds of Prey was my other runner-up.
I forgot Birds of Prey came out this year.
Yeah.
Jesus.
That is a genuinely good DCEU movie that does not get enough credit. The main reason it's not on the list is because while it did have a very good like final act, the biggest crime is I wanted more of it, and it just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So that was
no one can hate on the breakfast sandwich sequence.
Absolutely.
But I think that there's a very weird thing with this year where, you know, there was a part of 2020 that was before quarantine, but that just feels like so long ago to everybody.
Man. For like pre and after COVID.
I had to wrestle with this back and forth, and the reason that this did not make it to number 10 versus the one that beat it out is strictly out of pure... Don't cheat.
Well, I was like, do you want to talk about Extraordinary first?
Well, that's what I'm about to talk about.
Oh, okay. I thought you were
Extraordinary.
I thought you were going to number 10. Sorry.
No, that's my runner. My other runner-up was Extraordinary.
Why is that your number 1? No, I'm kidding.
Shut the fuck up. Extraordinary. Technically came out in 2019, but it didn't make it to the States until 2020, and unfortunately got bogged down by COVID stuff eventually. But it came out in like February, didn't it?
Which one? Extraordinary?
Yeah, Extraordinary came VOD, whatever the case. It did not really make it to theaters. But I just remember watching this movie and being surprisingly charmed by its characters and its writing and its plot and its editing. It is a movie that is way more competent and enjoyable than you would think it has any right to be, given, you know, how there's very little pedigree to the film, right? But 100% Extraordinary, check it out if you have not already. It is a uniquely fun and funny and interesting movie.
Yeah, we had a great time with it, I remember.
Yeah, we watched it together and we were just laughing our asses off. It was just a great time. And shoot, wasn't I the one who like pushed for us to even watch this and review it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I eventually relented. I don't know why I was hesitating, but I just was.
Well, we had a few things on our docket and it was just kind of stressful at the time, but I still remember I watched this on my own and was shocked at how good it was, and I pushed Michael and I was like, we have to watch this. And he agreed. Like, when it came down to it, Extraordinary is just a really fun movie.
Yeah.
It's really good, and it has a lot of heart and charm that is really difficult to pull off, and it deserves credit for doing so, and it deserves more exposure for doing so. So definitely check it out.
So, number 10.
All right. Come to Daddy.
Yeah, let's talk about Come to Daddy. The movie that we just had like, well, this looks weird. Let's just watch this. Like, we really did watch it just on a lark.
Come to Daddy. When I watched it, it was available on Amazon Prime Video. I didn't have to pay any extra for it. Since then, I have purchased it on digital and on Blu-ray. I want to show this movie to as many people as I can. Come to Daddy is such a weird, unpredictable movie. You don't know what kind of movie this is. You don't know what's going to happen. Like, the first time you watch it is a roller coaster. And I'm not going to spoil a goddamn thing about this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is so bizarre.
Go into it blind.
Yeah. And it manages to pull off such a strange mix of genres and topics and concepts. And, you know, never mind that it has Elijah Wood with the
weirdest haircut. Like,
God, the worst haircut. The worst haircut I've seen him in. It, again, surprising amount of heart for what it is, but it manages to be like this kind of horror movie, mystery movie, and it's unpredictable all the way through.
It effortlessly knows when to switch genres.
Yeah, it's strange. Very rarely do I see a movie where I'm like, what the fuck was that? And this was easily one of those movies. Fucking so happy that I came across this movie.
All right. My number 10 is Palm Springs.
I did not see this one.
Palm Springs was the...
I meant to.
I think the Lonely Island people made it, which makes sense. And it's a surprisingly nuanced performance by Andy Samberg, who is still like doing Andy Samberg style humor, but he just is depressed, nihilistic, just does not give a shit anymore human being. Do you know anything about the concept of Palm Springs?
Mood. No.
Okay. It's a Groundhog Day style movie where basically one person, who I won't give away, like stumbles into Andy Samberg, who has already been in it for years.
Yeah, I heard about it was a Groundhog's Day style thing, but yeah, like they're at some kind of party and they can't get out.
It's a wedding. And
okay, yeah.
It's a wedding, and they just it has a lot of exploration of basically just trying to pull your shit out from a rut, basically. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to give anything away because it's worth discovering, but there is also kind of a similar unpredictable element to it, where it's kind of like, oh, what the fuck? Okay, this is happening. And again, this is early on in the movie, so I'm not really giving anything away. Where there's this, they're in the middle of the desert, and all of a sudden, Andy Samberg just gets shot with an arrow out of nowhere, and then he turns around and goes, "You're a sick man, Roy!" as he starts running away. And then this man, like J.K. Simmons, comes out in camo and starts chasing him.
What the fuck? Okay.
This is like in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and the rest of it it's one of those ones, like Groundhog Day movies are hard to make fresh because. I just feel like
the time.
There's only so much you can do with that concept.
Yeah.
But this one finds a surprising amount to do with it, and also revolves around like living with shame and guilt.
I feel like there's a lot of potential in the concept, but a lot of people tend to miss the point.
Yeah.
potential.
And this one nails it, and
Okay.
it really finds some interesting new ground to take with it, and it's a very interesting movie, and I really liked it. So Palm Springs is my number 10.
All right. Number 9?
Number 9.
For me, it was Tenet.
Okay. Did not make my list, but go ahead.
I understand completely why it did not make some people's lists, and honestly, it's kind of weird to me that it's this far down my list, but also completely understandable. Tenet is a movie that lacks in a lot of places. It lacks three-dimensional characters. It lacks a proper throughput for its characters and its, really the things that make a movie something that you connect to on an emotional level. Tenet lacks almost entirely. However, what Tenet does manage to pull through on and execute on a level that I have never seen before, which is what gets it on this list in the first place, is the action sequences. Now, at this point, you would think that Christopher Nolan has exhausted his bucket of weird concepts to base action films on, and I'm not even going to get into the specifics of what makes the action sequences in this movie tick, like what the gimmick is. There's a very specific gimmick in this movie. It's revealed relatively early on, but it's a movie that upon repeat viewings will reward you with an understanding of just how all these things came together. And the way that the action sequences in the movie come together, the way that they are shot, is astonishing. Upon repeat viewings, I still could not figure out exactly how they pulled off certain sequences. And so I was just sitting there with that childlike wonder of whoa. Just, oh my god, this is so fucking cool, this is so interesting, this is so original. And yes, the villain is two-dimensional. The woman is basically there as a prop to be a damsel in distress. There's some unnecessary domestic violence in the movie. Be careful of that.
The main character is called the protagonist.
Spoiler. But overall, what the movie pulls off, I felt was worth the rest of the investment. You can really see Christopher Nolan's entire history of action sequences and gimmicks coming together to make this kind of weird-ass movie. And yeah, there are only 3 or 4 sequences throughout the movie that make use of this, but it's the kind of shit that you won't see from anyone but Christopher Nolan, and it was unique and interesting and exciting enough that I have to give this credit for being one of the more uniquely shot and executed movies, action movies that I've seen. I have to give it credit for that. So I made the effort to actually go out and see this in IMAX.
Yeah, it was quite the odyssey.
Yeah, it took some doing to make sure that we got to see this in theaters safely, and when we did, it was absolutely worth it to see in theaters. This movie's fucking amazing from a technical perspective. Other perspectives, but if you're someone who will go nuts over the fact that a movie pulled off some really cool technical stuff, Tenet is it. Definitely go see it.
Alright. My number 9 is Soul.
I missed Soul. Don't spoil shit for me, you piece of shit.
Okay, Jesus. Soul was a movie I love Soul. I've watched it 3-4 times now. So the fact that it's this low on this list means just how much I like the other movies on this list.
I can't believe that instead of spending my time catching up on movies like Soul, I had to spend my time catching up on movies like Antebellum.
Thank you, buddy.
Ugh, you owe me.
I do. All right. We'll negotiate terms later. Anyway, so Soul is definitely not necessarily. I'm not gonna say it's a Pixar movie for adults, but it does have more adult themes that it challenges kids with.
What was it? The title of your review video was Existential Dread for Kids.
Yeah, basically, where the whole central theme of the movie is what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to live your life? How should you go about it? Is it worth searching for dreams?
Inside Out on crack.
Basically. Well, it's made by the same director. So it makes sense that this is where it goes. The visual imagery for the soul-like worlds is really interesting. It's very unique. It's simplistic enough to understand and yet complex enough to really kind of think about. It's hard to go really too much detail without going into spoilers. I'm not going to say anything, but the dynamics they create. Now, there is some legitimate criticism. Do I need to cut you off, man?
Keep talking.
There is legitimate criticism to be had, and I'm still kind of on the fence on how I feel about it in terms of how it depicts black culture.
I feel like that's something to leave up to black people to speak on.
Very much so. Much so. I've read a lot of different theories about that. It definitely seems that everyone has their own opinion about it. Yeah. There is definitely one thing that does unfortunately lead into a trope that I'm not going to spoil, but it was kind of like, well, I get where they're going with it. It's still a good place where it goes, but it is a bit... You okay there, man?
I'm fine.
Okay. But it is still good where it goes. It does have some real honest conversations that I feel like I have had with people in regards to, things I've been trying to pursue and things I've been trying to push for. And I feel like the ending message of where it goes with it is still very solid. I've teared up multiple times watching it. I think it's a really solid piece. I think it really nails what it wants to nail, and it's a beautiful movie. So.
Side note, I'm pretty sure that the only reason it's not on my list is because I didn't get the chance to see it.
I mean, that's a pretty good point, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have Disney Plus until recently, so I'll probably watch it at some point, but it's just not in time to make my list. All right, number 8. Borat.
Okay.
Subsequent movie film.
Borat did not make my list.
Borat... did we review Borat? We
did, because I pissed you off multiple times by saying, I'm not a fan of the first Borat. You haven't seen it!
I mean
that's
fair point. But no, the Borat 2 pulled off an amazing achievement where the first one has aged in a very strange way, where the joke of the first one was to expose the latent racism / misogyny / general bigotry of people by wandering into their midst as a generic Middle Eastern ignoramus. And it achieved something interesting that was appropriate for the Jackass era. And the idea of doing a sequel 15-ish years on in a way that would be relevant was kind of mind-boggling to think of. But Rudy Giuliani scene aside, which in and of itself is kind of a staggering accomplishment, the things that this movie manages to pull off by including the concept of Borat's daughter...
she's wonderful in this.
She is not only just as good as Sacha Baron Cohen, but the channel that she opens into the same kind of weird trolling / exploratory documentary style filmmaking is really profound. And her character arc through the movie and the arc of their relationship throughout the movie manages to grant this movie a human element that the original was lacking, that I would not have believed you if you had told me it would have been able to pull that off. Borat 2 deserves a place on this list just for having the aspiration to go above and beyond what the original movie did and actually have a more progressive message while still being just as racist and fucked up as the original one, and managing to pull it off and having a certain measure of heart. I have multiple friends that cried during this movie because of the character arcs. And if you would have told me a year ago that the Borat movie would get fucking tears out of people, genuine heartfelt tears for the feminist message that it was portraying, I would have told you to go to hell and to stop fucking with me. Like, that I don't have much else to say. That alone is a staggering achievement for pulling that off while still being a faithful second Borat film. So I have to give it credit there. Yeah.
Okay. My number 8 is The Invisible Man. is my number 8. This is one you and I saw back in February, I want to say.
It was one of the first movies we saw in the year.
Yeah. Because it really, I remember just being blown away by it, because we saw it late too. Is fact it's like this is how you do reboots of like classic horror imagery. Is you find a way to modernize it, you find a way to make it interesting, you find a new message to say with it. You find this really unique angle on it that really plays on your expectations.
Yeah.
It plays on your other senses, and with some brilliant sound design, a brilliant use of metaphor and theme.
The cinematography, dude.
The cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. The performances are deep and nuanced, and the ending is so goddamn satisfying. Invisible Man, you hanging in there okay, buddy?
I'm good, I think. We'll see. It's fine.
Let me know if you need to take a break. But yeah, Invisible Man is just, for a movie that I guess was supposed to be like a Dark Universe film, is just better than I made any expectations for me. Or I thought it looked pretty good from the trailer.
Oh yeah.
So I loved Invisible Man. I think it's for a movie that it succeeds exactly what it wants to do. And yeah, I really don't have any issues with it. So
right on.
All right.
It's higher on my list, so I'll say my 2 cents on it later.
Okay. Number 7.
Gretel and Hansel.
Okay. Didn't make my list, but go ahead.
Gretel and Hansel was a really shockingly good movie to me. And I know that it was also to you, but clearly not to the same extent.
That one came back to staying power.
I can't say that I've watched it again since, but the tone sticks with me. If you're the kind of person who liked, who was really struck by the tone of, say, The Witch, this movie will do better for you. Not better than The Witch, but better than most movies. Mm-hmm. The thing is that while it doesn't feel as mature is not the term, as refined as something like The Witch, it dabbles in the same realms of like tone. The way that Gretel and Hansel utilizes imagery and sound and editing to convey its feeling of dread is in the same ballpark as those really great horror movies of recent years that focus more on a more artistic side of things. I really enjoyed the way that this movie progressed, even as I, you know what's going on. Like, you understand what's happening. You don't trust this witch. Through the whole movie, there's no point where you're like, oh, I'm sure she's fine and Gretel is just being overly paranoid. Like, no. You know Gretel's right. You know the witch is doing some kind of cannibalism kind of shit. You just don't know how. And it follows through on this in a way that works. But beyond that, the stylistic elements of this movie are what really make it click. And it manages to pull off a weird kind of mood and vibe that is rarely seen in movies these days. Mm-hmm. And
that's true.
Or even before. Like, this is a new kind of thing in film, and I really enjoyed it. It stuck with me in a way that few movies have stuck with me recently, and I think it deserves a lot more recognition than it's been getting. So that's why it's on my list. I really adored how this movie was executed.
Okay. All right. My number 7, I need to preface this because I know for a fact it's higher on your list. In that this is mostly this low on the list because of staying power. Mm-hmm. As a fact,
how dare you?
Because my number 7 is Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Ooh, you're wrong.
I have very personal reasons for my top 2.
You're wrong.
I have nothing objectively wrong with the film in any way. It is it's a wonderful story. It is romantic. It is incredibly well written, visually astounding. But for me, it's one of those ones where if I had to look back, it did not affect me as strongly as the entries on this list, which is why it's lower down. So this is definitely not a objective opinion on this one, because objectively there's not a lot wrong with it. But subjectively, I just got more out of these other entries. And I'm assuming we'll talk about it much later, so I'll leave the rest for that.
Every movie above this on your list better be fucking amazing, Michael.
There's only one you might have issues with, but everything else...
Oh, boy. Can't wait to call you racist about that one.
It would be a stretch.
All right, so number 6 on mine is The Invisible Man.
Okay.
I understand certain people's gripe with this. My main gripe with it is that some of the most effective moments in the movie got ruined by the trailer. If you have somehow managed to avoid the trailers for this movie, go fucking see it. If you have somehow managed to forget the trailers for this movie, go fucking see it. Even if you've seen the trailers for this movie and you remember them, go see it anyway. It's ruined a couple of the more suspenseful moments of the movie for you, but overall, the way that it executes it is worth it. The main thing to be careful about with this movie is that it can be deeply triggering for people who have been gaslit in relationships and convinced by people that they thought they could trust that what they're talking about isn't really that big of a deal. This movie uses that kind of theme to craft its horror. And for better or for worse, that's what makes its horror that much more effective. You have characters where, all of their loved ones believe that she believes what she's saying, but they don't necessarily believe that she's sane. And that just makes it that much worse as she's trying to convey to people that what she's afraid of is actually real. And given that you know that this movie is called The Invisible Man,
you already know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you know from the start that she's not crazy. That, maybe she might be, like, the paranoia is making her imagine some things that are not necessarily true. The majority of the stuff that she's thinking about is 100% valid. And you know how crazy it sounds to people for her to just straight up say, oh, he's invisible somehow. I don't know how, but he's invisible. And he has a way to be invisible, and he's making it look like I am the crazy person. And how fucking crazy that makes you sound to other people. And again, if you've ever been in a situation where no one believes you, when you have borne witness to a monster and been their victim and had to endure their abuse, and then later been still in danger while no one believes that you're actually in danger and you just need to calm down because you're traumatized. Like, this movie uses that trauma as its theme of horror. So be careful of that. But that being said, understand that if you can withstand that as a theme within the movie, there's some good catharsis that comes.
Oh yeah, big time.
Towards the end of it.
And the way the use of imagery and sound is just amazing.
This movie does a really great thing where in some scenes, like, it'll be shooting an empty movie and then an empty room, and then something will move and it's clearly the hand of somebody that's there that you can't see, and that's scary. But there's other moments in the movie where it's just shooting like an empty hallway or an empty room, and Elizabeth Moss is cowering in the corner, sobbing from sheer fucking stress and fear for her life as it pans over to look at what is apparently an empty room, but he could be there.
Well, I think my favorite example of that is when Elizabeth Moss is just going back and forth, like putting clothes away, and the camera's following her as she moves, but she walks back and the camera just lingers on this empty space for a bit. And you're
like, what?
And then it kind of like, why is it? Oh shit, is he there?
Yeah.
And you never get confirmation whether or not he is. It just it plays with your expectations in that way.
Yeah, it puts you in the same paranoid mindset that she's in.
And by the time it escalates, it still catches you by surprise.
Yeah, you're going to get to a point in the movie where he attacks her actively. Like, I don't think that's a spoiler. Like, you will get to a point in the movie where she is being attacked by someone that you cannot see. And aside from the fact that this is, like, a scary concept, the execution of these scenes is incredible. It is really amazing how they pull these scenes off. And as you progress through the movie and the plot progresses, it is it is a fitting metaphor for that kind of abuse.
Absolutely.
And in the same way that if you watched, the worst of list, Antebellum is, not deserving of the kind of trauma that it taps it into trying to portray its message. I would argue that The Invisible Man 100% follows through on delivering to justify the trauma that it taps into.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It does not make light of these things. It does not casually use these things. It pays justice to the fact that these things are fucking terrible and what it takes to escape them. And I was blown away by how well executed this movie was.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that. It's a fantastic movie and it deserves more love than it got.
Fucking amazing.
My number 6 is a movie you convinced me to watch. Feels Good Man is my number 6.
Yeah.
So this is like, I don't usually review documentaries. I do them very, very rarely.
Yeah.
This is one that you convinced me to watch because it was just an interesting subject matter, which is Pepe the Frog and how it got radicalized by the far right-wing movement. And...
No, appropriated,
yeah. Appropriate, sorry, you're right.
Can't radicalize a meme.
Or can you?
One day Pepe was like, I hate Jewish people.
Oh god, I hope no one takes that clip out of context.
I mean, I think it's hard to with that one, knowing the history.
But anyway, it's the way, like, this goes to some levels on the shit that I didn't know about. And I like to think I'm pretty knowledgeable on a lot of this shit.
Same.
But this goes in the kind of like, wait, fucking what? Like, there's a bidding war for Pepe memes? What the ever-living god-smacking fuck?
Rare Pepes.
Rare Pepes. To this day, as a concept, still fucking baffles me.
Oh, that cringy fucking bastard in his Lamborghini.
Oh, God.
Unbelievable.
But the way that has a commentary, not just Pepe as a cultural icon, but as, like, just as the far-right movement as a whole and how that whole movement got radicalized and built up and ignored, which let it build up in secret to the point where it's this gigantic monstrosity that now wields way more power than it should.
Yeah.
That even now, the efforts we've had to, like, tamper it down are still, like, it's still out there and it's still alive. It's still growing and festering in whatever corner of the internet it's found now. I mean, the fact that it's still the case is still utterly terrifying.
Since we saw this movie back in August and now we have come upon... the point where QAnon has grown into a genuine domestic terror threat.
Yep. And
so that's,
in the house.
Weirdly, it gives its own weird extra level to what we saw in this documentary.
Absolutely. And it's the real, like, as ridiculous as the concept sounds, the realities are much more disturbing. And this documentary did an excellent job of emphasizing that, along with the struggle of the sorriest artist I've ever seen in my life. This poor man who just by the movie's end just looks tired and broken because his, like, innocent, like, stoner creation got turned into this monstrosity far beyond anything you could ever possibly control.
Poor Matt Fury.
Like Matt Fury, that just the poor man.
Yeah.
And as a documentary, it is expertly crafted. It does what a good documentary should do. It's engaging. It's engaging. It does what a good documentary does, which it formats its way in a way that escalates properly, and informs on information that isn't publicly known. About a topic that will grab your attention just by looking at the cover. It's like, is that stupid frog I've seen on the internet? What's that about? And then all of a sudden, like, far-right movements and 4chan and 8chan and Nazis and white supremacists and, hey, here's how bad this can get if you don't do anything about these people. We have 4 minutes left on the clock on this.
Jesus, really?
Yeah.
Fucking bitch-ass battery videotape capacity thing. What's the size of the SD card you got in here?
I don't know. I have to check.
You better check. Not enough, whatever it is.
We'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So,
Recording?
Yes? Yes, we are.
Yeah, we're back.
All right. So, number 6 on my list is... Fucking turn the lighting back on. Hey, jellyfish. Okay, number 6 on my list is Possessor.
Okay. Possessor did not make my list, surprisingly.
Oh, I'm sure. Possessor is an aggressively unpleasant movie. Possessor does a really amazing thing where it doesn't really let you connect to any of the characters, but the overall themes that the movie explores throughout its runtime are deep and disturbing enough for you to be like, oh, I didn't care about these characters, but I'm still disturbed. It is an astonishing effort from Brandon Cronenberg, David Cronenberg's son. If you're familiar with David Cronenberg's work, I highly recommend you check out this movie because it is a unique and interesting vision from somebody who is relatively new to the genre and to filmmaking in general. And man, this movie stuck out to me. It is burned into my memory in a way that very few movies have been recently. And I do emphasize burned into my memory. Like, it's disturbing. It is dark. It is fucked up. It explores some really intense sci-fi themes, and in that kind of dark sci-fi way that, most movies have avoided since the 80s. So, very highly recommended. I really enjoyed this movie. It was interesting.
All right. Number 5, I believe. Or number... Wait, what?
6.
Number 6. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my number 5 is... Because my number 6 Feels Good, Man.
Okay.
So my number 5 would be Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Oh, I guess that was my number 5. My bad. Possessor was my number 5. Haha.
Okay. Now we're back on the same page.
Yeah.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is my number 5. That was a Netflix movie that came out last year. That had this Chadwick Boseman's last performance before he passed. Tragically last year. That one broke my heart. That is this excellent little bottle movie. It's based on a play, I found out. And it definitely feels that way. It's all takes place in real time, just in this recording studio. As they're trying to record this song, but it's a great movie about a black artist who is just not putting up with anyone's shit, doing things exactly the way she wants to do it. She won't accept no for an answer, and she very explicitly says why in the movie, which is like, if you give them an inch, they'll take everything. Which while I'm in here, I am in charge. I'm gonna make sure it's done my way. Everything's gonna be done exactly the way I say it, and they're gonna have to fucking deal with it.
Don't compromise your artistic vision.
Exactly.
Good shit.
And meanwhile, Chadwick Boseman is also like the other primary character in this movie. He's trying to play the system to get ahead, but he ends up getting screwed over. And it's a great historical piece. It led to a great discussion with me and Ron about the nature of racism in Hollywood and just in general in systematic America. You look like you thought.
Is this based on a true story?
The artists are real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like these are based on real people.
Okay.
The movie itself is based on a play. I don't know how historically accurate the play is, but the people are real, and the personalities involved in them are very, very accurate, from my understanding.
No, I didn't get around to this one, but it sounds very intriguing.
Viola Davis is Viola Davis. She's amazing in it.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Viola Davis.
Viola Davis is one of the best actors currently working.
Even in Suicide Squad, one of the worst fucking movies ever.
There's a reason she's coming back in the next one.
Viola Davis is still like a treasure in the middle of that fucking shitstorm. Like, it's amazing.
But yeah, it is. I've watched it twice. I can say without a doubt it is an excellent movie. That it really conveys that a very often undiscussed part of being a black person in America, and it led to, like I said, a very, very interesting discussion, which I'll encourage you to watch. That I highly treasure. So it definitely is one of the movies that feels educational and it brings that discussion, and it does what it should do, which is present a different side of this that you wouldn't consider it otherwise.
Right.
So, My Running Back Bottom, loved it to death. Great movie. That's my number 5.
I'll have to check that out.
So
good shit.
Number 4.
Number 4 for me was Feels Good, Man.
Okay.
Feels Good, Man was, people underestimated this movie when it came out because they're like, we're going to make a documentary about Pepe. He like the cartoon frog who, but given that I used to be somebody that frequented, 4chan boards and everything, it was very interesting seeing this movie because I was part of 4chan up until just before Pepe started getting like appropriated into that kind of stuff, and just before like the Scientology anonymous protests started happening, like there was a weird crossover. So I had this perspective into it that was a little more personal because I was never into it to really interact with the boards. I more just sat there as an observer, and I recognized the more toxic aspects, but it was more just interesting to watch. And I kind of understood intrinsically how that stuff was connected to the alt-right stuff that it became focused on as time went on. But seeing this movie not only solidified some of the details of how it got from point A to point B, but the part of it that really struck me was the notion of the death of the artist, which if you have checked out Lindsay Ellis's work, you're familiar with. And the idea is that once the artist puts a work out into the world, that work can take on a life of its own that is no longer under the control of the artist. And this is definitely the premier case study for how that kind of stuff works, and arguments to be made for or against that kind of paradigm. And to watch Matt Fury, who, you know, when I was on 4chan, Pepe was just like one of the main memes on the site. He wasn't a white supremacist figure, but, you know, people knew the whole feels good man kind of meme, and like Pepe was a figurehead. And I knew where it came from. Like, I'd actually done the research and gone back and read Matt Fury's comics and gotten to know the characters outside of the context of the Pepe meme. So when I heard that Pepe was being appropriated into a white supremacist symbol, you know, there was the whole idea of like, oh man, Pepe did nothing wrong. Like, he doesn't deserve this kind of shit. But to watch Matt Fury's, you know, emotional journey in relation to this transformation of his own creation was fascinating. And the insight that it gave me into 4chan's relationship with the progression of the alt-right was really interesting to see. And the movie is dynamic, it's fun, it's human, it's personal. It is a far more entertaining film than it has any right to be.
Yeah.
And I really did not expect to be this captivated or interested in this movie for this long. And I saw the movie, I've seen it like 3 times now. It's a really great piece of documentary filmmaking. And I think its strength is that aside from really focusing on the psychological and sociological elements of how the alt-right progressed to what it is on 4chan and Pepe's role in that, is focusing on the more human element of Matt Fury as the creator of this meme who, you know, it just got out of his control. And it's just this innocent character that he wanted to get control back of.
Yeah.
And watching that side of it really humanized it. And I don't know, I just really connected with the idea of an artist who had a certain intention for his work that got corrupted, and his fight to get that back. It's a far more compelling movie than I think it has any right to be. And I like, if you haven't watched Feels Good Man yet, like, absolutely make that effort to do so. It is a fascinating movie and one of the most interesting documentaries I've ever seen. So
yeah. All right. My number 4 is Sound of Metal.
Yeah.
Now I know this, like, I'm not gonna try. I know you have very personal connections with movies, so I'm not gonna try to step on your toes there. Sound of Metal was this film that I didn't even heard of. I just kind of looked it up on Sound and Rotten Tomatoes. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And then I watched it, and it's this very fascinating exploration of what you do basically when your life stripped away from you in a way that you have no control over. In this case, it is about a heavy metal musician, drummer who suddenly becomes deaf, and he has to find basically a new reason to live within that change, because music was his entire identity. And the way they explore that and the cultures of that, and kind of how he rebuilds himself and finds peace with it, is a very fascinating journey. And I'm kind of dancing around because I'm sure you have a lot more personal things to say about it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of saving it for that. But from my perspective, I thought this was a fascinating journey, and I'm happy that it took the chance to really explore this undiscussed community in a way that I've never seen done in movies before.
Yeah.
And definitely needs to be highlighted more. And I thought it was really wonderful in the way that it shows that, like, yes, this is what happens, but that doesn't mean you can't find a way to move forward, or you can't find peace with it, or you can't even find peace because of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sound of Metal is my number 4.
All right. Number 3, Wolfwalkers.
We'll talk about Wolfwalkers again, but yeah.
Okay, so that's higher on your list?
It's higher on my list.
Okay. Wolfwalkers, I struggled with these top 3 quite a bit. But Wolfwalkers was a movie that I was not necessarily hesitant, but, you know, like, it's a kid's movie. It's an animated movie. You're like, all right, I'll check it out, sure. But then I watched it, and I was flabbergasted.
Yeah.
I was blown away by every single part of this movie. I was blown away by the quality of its animation, the quality of the acting, the quality of the writing, the characters, the world building, the flow, the tension, the character arcs. Literally everything about this movie is basically perfect. The comparison I like to make is that I haven't felt this way about animated films outside of Studio Ghibli movies, which is high praise because I fucking love Studio Ghibli movies. And the way I like to encapsulate it, which if you've watched our review of the film, you'll know, I basically compare it to the first half being more like My Neighbor Totoro and the second half being like Princess Mononoke. And it manages to capture the same spirit of wonder and awe and beauty and fun and innocence, and then in the second half capture the same spirit of sheer horror and tension and intensity. Like, this movie executes on a level that Disney dreams of executing on. And granted, I haven't seen Soul, so I can't say anything about that. But
Wolfwalker is better than Soul. Huh?
All right, but in terms of, you know, what these kinds of movies aim to do and what they actually manage to execute, Wolfwalkers is an astonishing victory on literally every front. I was emotionally affected and drawn into this movie in a way that I never expected to be. And I loved it. I cannot recommend this movie highly enough. It is one of the best animated films I have ever seen in my entire life. There is so much charm and heart and passion put into this movie that I just absolutely cannot not recommend it to anyone. Like, there are movies where I would recommend it more to some people than other people, but this is just one of those movies where everyone should check this out. It's just a great fucking movie. In every single possible way. It is a fantastic movie. I cannot praise it highly enough. It is a 10 out of 10. 100%. So, yeah.
All right. My number 3 is Promising Young Woman.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't get around. Wait, isn't that technically this year? 2021?
No, it came out last year.
Really?
It's like released in December. It's like it came in theaters for a while, then it went VOD in January.
I thought it came out in January.
No, it released on demand on January.
I would have made an effort to see it then.
It came out in theaters last month, like in December.
That's too bad. Okay.
But yeah, Promising Young Woman. Promising Young Woman is an uncompromising, unflinching, bold take on rape culture. And it's a movie that is definitely almost revenge thriller and extremely catharsis, and that doesn't leave anyone go. It not only helps people that they commit the action accountable, it helps people that enable it. It helps the witnesses, the school administration, everyone. Like, even the lawyer that defends him at one point, he's the only one. Like, I'm not gonna give anything away. But everyone is held accountable. It is unflinching in how it basically holds your head to this and says, "This is what it is. fucking look at it, recognize your part in it, and fucking do something. And I have a huge admiration for the movie for that part, and the fact that it is unrelentingly tense. It is unrelentingly uncomfortable, and it is basically like it is just. It really just says like, yes, this is what it is. This is how it affects people. It is fucked up, and if you don't know anything about it, you're part of the fucking problem.
Wow.
It's one of those movies. Like I was watching a comedy specialist talk about this too, and it says like even if people commit this stuff as a small population, it's like 1 every 10 men do this kind of thing. If the other 9 don't do anything, then you might as well not fucking be there. And that's basically the principle of this too. It's like it's not just the person that does it that's responsible. It's everyone that enables it. It's everyone that excuses it. It's everyone that gets away with it. It's all part of the problem. And the movie like revels in what best you describe as like female rage, where like it is actively a woman with power. And she revels in like making other men uncomfortable. Like her entire premise in the movie is that she pretends to be blackout drunk, gets taken home by men who pretend to be nice guys.
Yeah.
And then when
they try to take advantage of her.
And they try to get advantage of her, then she basically scares the bejesus out of them, and then marks her on her list. And just the way it plays with that power dynamic and recognizes just how often this shit happens.
Yeah. And
again, does not like mince words or play it down in any way. It's actually like it's a first directorial debut from this director, and it is astonishing work. There are some mixed feelings about the ending from a lot of people.
That's the one criticism I've heard.
I personally understand why they made the choices they make in it.
Yeah.
Without giving anything away, if you ever watch it, we can talk about it.
Yeah, we can talk about it more later.
But just for what it is and what it aims to do, and just the uncompromised nature of it, this movie gets a lot of fucking respect. And I wish more movies like this would actively hold people accountable to everyone involved.
Also, God bless Carey Mulligan for taking on a role this fucking intense.
This might be Carey Mulligan's best performance of her career. Again, it's completely unflinching in its portrayal of it, and it is satisfying and unsatisfying at the same time.
Sounds appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those movies that'll make you go back and go like, oh god, like I hope I've never done anything to like propagate this or anything like that. It's really questions your role in enabling horrible people and like actual monsters.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about calling out people.
Yeah.
There's a thing where things that perpetuate this kind of culture are more subtle than outright propagation of that kind of aggression. And we need to be conscious of that and actually, push for a better world even when it seems like not as big of a deal as an all-out assault.
And not only does that, not only calls people out, but it also shows just the lasting damage that it causes people.
Trauma.
Like the trauma of it, not just the people who suffer from it, everyone around them, and how it just destroys. It could destroy their life. And
I need to watch this one. I've got some spoons to spare.
I think I sat there and like when the movie was over and the credits rolled, I think I exhaled for like the first time through the movie.
One of those where you forget that you're not breathing.
Yeah. But yeah, it's uncompromising. I have a shit ton of admiration for that.
Right on. I'll check it out.
So that's my number 3.
All right. So number 2 on my list was The Sound of Metal.
Okay.
Music is a huge part of my life. And one of my worst nightmares has been the idea of going deaf. I make my own music. I listen to music religiously. It's one of the few things that calms me down in some states that I'm in. It brings me a unique joy and solace that I don't get from anything else. And if any of you know who Ingmar Bergman is, Bergman actually said, being a filmmaker, he said that if he had the choice between going blind and going deaf, he would choose going blind because he can't imagine his life without music. And I can relate to that on a very deep level. So, watching this movie was a really wrenching experience for me. I was actually originally scheduled to do the review with Michael and Sarah, but after watching the movie, it was just too much. I didn't feel like I could talk about it on camera. Um, but I've absolutely thought at times about this and concluded that if I lost my hearing, I might just go ahead and kill myself. Because it's that important to me. It's that intrinsic to who I am. And if any of you are part of Letterboxd, which is LETTERBOXD.com, it's like a social network for movie fans. One of the most visible reviews of the past year is of a guy who can relate to this movie even more deeply than I can, because he is a drummer professionally whose life has been music, who started losing his hearing. And I invite you all to go and read that review for yourselves, because it conveys something that is like my experience with the movie, but much more intense and deep, because he's essentially living it right now. And it's basically a thing of watching this main character struggle, watching Riz Ahmed's performance of a drummer who is desperately trying to not lose the last bit of his hearing that he has, and trying to get the money for the surgery so that he can potentially regain the hearing that he's lost. In my review for the movie, I concluded it basically saying that at the end of this movie, I just broke down crying, because it was the first time that I thought that if I lost my hearing, I might not kill myself. It was astonishingly powerful. And again, I recommend you go on Letterboxd and you will find the review from this guy. It has tens of thousands of likes. It's one of the most seen and liked reviews of this past year on the site. And he can probably speak to it much more deeply than I can. But this movie was so intensely real and powerful and hopeful and tragic and sad and beautiful. And for how much I fucking hated A Place Beyond the Pines, I cannot tell you how shocked I was that the co-writer of that movie made one of the most emotionally intense and beautiful movies that I've ever seen. The Sound of Metal is a profoundly affecting film. And if music matters to you on the level that it matters to me, you should watch it, because you'll understand. It's a profoundly human masterpiece. And it's my number 2. So, yeah.
Okay. My number 2 is definitely the most unorthodox choice on this list. Objectively speaking, I know it's not better than a lot of the movies on this list.
Okay.
But I'm going to explain very specifically why I put this as high on this list.
I would hope so. I would love it if you just stated it and like mic dropped and it was like, back to you, Mahan. It was like, I'm not explaining myself. Think about it. Deal with it.
Okay, so my number 2 is Bill and Ted Face the Music.
All right. I think that's fair.
And a couple of big reasons why is this came out in August. We are 5 months into the quarantine. It is almost just over 1 month since my 3-year relationship ended. So I am like emotionally and physically just exhausted, burnt out from being in quarantine for 5 goddamn months, like many of us were and are.
Yeah.
and just depressed and nihilistic and cynical. And then you have this movie that comes along, and I binged the Bill and Ted movies up to watching the third one, and it is like the most sincerely optimistic film that came out this year. That is it's not like a brilliant smart movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it has so much of its heart on its sleeve. There's not a cynical bone in its body, and it knows what makes the last couple movies work in this weirdly charming series.
Okay.
And I watched it again recently when I was like, do I really want to put this high on the list? And I rewatched it like, yeah, I do.
Okay.
So
I also did not see this because it was like $20 to rent, so I was like,
it's worth. I bought it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those movies like it should not work. It's one of those like long-term sequels, kind of like Borat. It was like it should not work again, but it does because yeah, true. Because it is not only just so hilarious to watch. The kids, the people they cast to play their kids are just amazing. There's some. It not only is it hilarious, it's heartfelt. It is so sincere in its optimism, and it's basically how it eventually ends, or it culminates, and like the whole. It finally feels like the whole like how do Bill and Ted actually unite the world. And the way they do it is like you can kind of see it coming, but it's still heartfelt and sincere when it happens. And you just have to appreciate a movie that is so optimistic and in such a beautiful way.
Yeah.
That is in its own ridiculously silly identity. It owns it through and through.
Well, being unpredictable isn't everything, right?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily... So, for me personally, the reason this time's listed is because this is the movie I needed when this came out.
All right.
It is a movie because I needed that dose of happiness. I needed that dose of just hope that, hey, things can and will get better. Like it's and for that reason alone, and just the fact that it's just a delightful film on its own merit, especially like the other two Bill and Ted movies, because they do bring back a lot of elements on there, like death comes back, for example.
Anyone who hasn't seen the second one needs to before seeing the third one.
I watched the second one, then jumped right into the third one, and it was practically seamless. That's how like perfectly they capture the tone of this. And they got the hide and seek girl to play.
Samara Weaving. Right?
Samara Weaving, yeah.
I fucking love her.
And it just, to me, it's like, this is the dose of just hope and ray of sunshine that I needed, and I think a lot of people did at the time when it came out, and it still holds up on second viewing. So Bill and Ted, for that I acknowledge it's a very personal reason, makes it on my number 2 list.
All right. So, number 1's.
All right.
Ready for it?
Ready.
Now, let me see yours before I...
You've already said mine, so...
No, I don't know which one it was, though. Oh, all right, I got you. All right, so number 1 on my list for this year was Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Okay.
Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a perfect movie. It is flawless. It executes on a level where it does enough of what it needs to do and enough restraint where it needs to be restrained. It is a masterpiece of cinematography and pacing. And the whole premise of the movie is this doomed romance. And you know it's doomed from the start. This is 2 women in a time where you absolutely know that these 2 women, not just because of the fact that they're women, but because of class separation, will not be able to live their lives out happily together. And you know that both of them are forced to be restrained for their own reasons within their social standings. For whatever reason, they're both not allowed to be themselves entirely. And this movie is one of the most heartfelt, pure expressions of suppressed queer identity that I have ever seen. It's not a spoiler. Like, it feels mildly spoilerish because it talks about like what the plot is going to be, but it's not, because the plot is entirely predictable on a certain level, even if at some point in the movie you manage to convince yourself that it's not going to be what it is. The women meet. They have to be kind of guarded from each other on a certain level. They get to a point where they're able to connect and are freely able to experience their love for each other in this really intense romance. The power of the cinematography and the acting and the way that they look at each other, just the power that they convey through their eyes towards each other, is so intense and so powerful and beautiful. And while they are both not allowed to be who they actually are in these times, neither of them are ashamed of it. And both of them are fully 100% defiantly themselves, however much they know they have to hide it. So when they get to a point where they are freely able to be themselves and freely able to talk to each other and indulge in this romance, it is this beautiful, tragic, bittersweet inferno of just self-actualization and passion and love and romance. And it is a romantic movie, very much so. It is an artistic movie, very much so. But it does so in a way that is so beautifully measured. This is not some over-the-top indulgence. This is an artistic monolith. It is... If you have ever suppressed your feelings for someone else because society was telling you that it's not okay to be that person, if you have ever suppressed who you are for those reasons, if you have ever gotten to experience the freedom of indulging in that side of you, knowing that it's temporary because of obligations, this movie will cut you to your core. And at the same time as it gives voice to that kind of oppression and repression, it gives voice to the kind of liberation that comes with that identity, and the fact that that identity will not be suffocated, that it is alive and it has always been alive. It is such an incredibly beautiful and heartbreaking testimony to queer identity. The patience this movie has with developing the relationship between its main characters pays off in such a dizzying, intoxicating romance that even though you know that it is doomed, you can't help but be swept up in it. And when it comes to its end, you can't help but have your heart broken with it. And the very last shot of the movie, which is essentially part of an epilogue, it's wordless. There's no dialogue. But it will stay with me forever, because you can see it's basically a single shot sustained for a prolonged period of time, but watching the emotions that this character goes through and realizing what they are experiencing and remembering and how they are feeling about it, your heart breaks with them. It is so deeply felt. It's so profound. It's so heartbreaking and bittersweet. It's profound. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is one of my top movies ever now. Of all time. It's not just one of the best movies of the year, it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. It gives a voice and a soul to this kind of experience that I have never seen the likes of before. And it touched me and broke me in ways that I had not experienced before. And I can't imagine feeling in a similar way anytime soon. It is my top movie of 2020, no question. If you are into any kind of romantic film, not in a sappy kind of way, but in a true, deeply felt way where you feel like there's a part of you that no one has seen and you are aching for someone to see it, this movie delivers in a way that I have not seen before. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. I fucking love this movie. It is a perfect movie. 10 out of 10. No question. I can't recommend it highly enough. And it's absolutely the kind of experience I look for and almost never expect to get out of a movie. So, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, my top movie for 2020.
Well, fuck, I have to top that.
Yeah.
See, now I'm just tempted to throw a troll movie out there.
How's your cartoon, Michael?
Wow, Judgy.
It was number 3 on my list. Like, come on. That's great.
No, I just wanted to literally look at the wrong movie just to piss people off. It's like, my number 1 is Archive.
Elbow you in the nose. Fuck off.
My number 1 was Wolfwalkers. I'm not quite have the emotional monologue that Muha just gave, but I will say that are we still good? Yeah, okay, right. That Wolfwalkers is just by far and away the most beautifully animated film that came out this year, probably the last couple years.
I would say in the last decade.
I mean, well, I'm comparing like other movies the studio has done. They have a very similar art style.
Sure, I have yet to see the other movies that the studio has done, but
if you want a movie that just takes what is essentially a very basic fairy tale and makes this beautiful story about choosing love over fear and like generational authority driven by that fear, even going so much as like fear of God to a certain extent, which is what the main villain kind of seems to represent, like the highest authority. And
the performances.
The performances are amazing, and like that's what like all of it's carried through in that way, and it's helped by this amazingly hand drawn animation. What is so funny?
Above all, the sheep. The things that make this movie. The sheep.
Very, very Spyro the Dragon, though, sheep.
Yeah, fantastic. Just, if you watch the movie, you'll know exactly what part we're talking about with the sheep.
It is a movie that has like perfect narrative escalation, perfect narrative storytelling.
The pacing.
The pacing is phenomenal. The visual storytelling is unbelievably good. There's a lot that is conveyed without a word needing to be said. The themes and the structure and the art style all play into this wonderfully constructed fairy tale that is it's really kind of sad that it's only on Apple Plus right now because it's something that really deserves a wider audience. And hopefully
Apple TV Plus is available on all your frickin' PlayStation things and everything. It's $5 a month and it has a free trial. Fucking like, unless you have some kind of weird bias against Apple, there's no reason to give it a shot.
Well, some people do. But,
yeah, unless they're fucking lost. Like,
the general point, though, is in terms of just talking about like themes, these relationships between like the father and daughter, or the almost sister dynamic that the children have, to the way that the wolf animation scenes look and feel, just as almost like transcendence to it. in the way that these very spiritual
Yeah.
and very emotional. It's a movie with a very real physical and emotional stakes.
Yeah.
And you feel every ounce of it. Especially get to the climax when these you're like every action you like constantly is like no, and it sneaks up on you. Don't even realize how invested you are in it until like you're hit by something unexpectedly. It was like, oh shit, and then it just tugs at you so hard.
we give a very intense spoiler-free interview of this up until a certain point. We'll let you know before the spoilers kick in, but both of us felt very strongly about this movie when we first watched it. We watched it together.
Yeah.
And we recorded the review almost immediately afterwards. Like, go watch the review. You can see you can see our immediate responses to it. Wolfwalkers is fucking incredible.
And it's my personal number one pick of the year.
Yeah.
Not quite for the same personal reasons that you had to show me up. But
you're the one who wanted to go second, Michael, so
fair. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Wolfwalkers is an unbelievably good movie, and if you have access to it one way or another, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely worth your time.
Yeah.
And that wraps up 2020. We can finally put that behind us, hopefully. We're still stuck in a spiritual hellscape, but at least 2020 is over.
Kafka-esque nightmare.
So now the next stage is going to be catching up on all the 2021 movies that we haven't seen so far.
We'll get there.
Yeah, it'll eventually even out. But thank you for joining us on this long evening sit and chat.
What time is it?
It's like almost midnight.
It's midnight, yeah.
We'll be back hopefully with bigger and better stuff as time goes forward. We're working on some exciting stuff that we're hoping to have for you. In the meantime, if you guys want to help us out, we really appreciate your support on Patreon. Right now, a lot of our projects are stalled just because I can't afford it.
Like and subscribe, smash that bell!
Or even just sit through the ads so I get ad revenue from that. Even that would help.
Yeah.
Since we're monetized again, thank you, God. Granted, I'm not going to see that money for months, but still.
It's fine. I think it's more the fact that we've finally gotten to the point where you're qualified for that kind of stuff, which is a huge fucking step. Like, you've been plugging away at this for 8-ish years.
Yeah.
Dude. No, and of course, like a lot of thanks to our loyal viewers who come back to see us gripe about movies again and again and watch us gush about the ones that we love. And, thank you so much for your support. It's gotten us here, and we hope to keep growing as the years go on.
Yeah, so hopefully we're hoping for big changes this year, and we're just going to see what happens. So.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for watching. See you all in season 9.
Have a good one.